live from Detroit, Michigan. This is the Honestly Sis Podcast.
Drew Prince Music.
Welcome. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Whenever this podcast may find you, welcome. Hi. But over the coming weeks, you will get to learn a lot about me. Honestly Sis is a newsletter that I have created 7 years ago where I tell personal stories about life, love, and spirituality. And I love this newsletter. It has been my baby for the last 7 years, but in the name of extension, I'm turning it into a podcast. And so I have a quick little introduction letter that I'm going to read to you guys. This is not going to be a very long episode, but I just want to introduce myself, tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit a reason why I'm doing the podcast, and then what you can look forward to in the future. Okay. So my name is Honest Am. I am a two-time graduate from the Hampton University. I began my career in public accounting, where I quickly realized that that's not the place for me. And for the last 10 years, I have been working on healing myself and getting myself on my path. I have been working on a manuscript called I have been working on a manuscript for a supernatural thriller called The Association that I am beginning to shop the first book of that series this year. So wish me luck. I have been a yoga teacher. I am a third generational healer. I am able to do tarot and channel. Don't tell my agents, but a big portion of the book was channeled. And my greatest wish for my life right now is to get up out of corporate America. Um, I currently live in Detroit, Michigan on the Lower East Side, and I have an adorable puppy or a dog named Cuddy, who is literally my pre-baby and the love of my life. The intention for this podcast is to help build community of healers and leaders. I'm really not trying to be a guru and create all these followers. Like, I'm really trying to just help you heal, help you know that spirituality and the spiritual world is real, and to help assist you and give you any tools that you may need on your journey. The purpose of this podcast, earlier this summer, I read for the very first time All About Love by Bell Hooks. And I'm so glad that I read that book because I thought that me living a life of love, me helping bring in heaven on earth was, it was something, I was doing something brand new. But looking at Bell, reading that book, it really gave me the words to understand what I'm doing and what my mission. And I am just trying to live a love ethic. I am trying to show that love is all there is, and that by following your heart, it will never lead you astray. The mission. I read this book and I had to write this down because it clearly describes what I'm trying to do with this space and the purpose of the Honestly Sis newsletters slash podcast. And so the purpose of this space, like I said, is of course to build community, but also to do mindful remembering. And Bell Hooks describe it as follows. Mindful remembering lets us put the broken bits and pieces of our hearts together again. Healing is a communal activity, and I am using this space to not only heal myself, but to also show you that we are all more alike than it seems. And so a lot of a lot of these stories are going to be very personal, and you may think that I'm just trying to tell my business or whatever you may think, trying to be gossipy, whatever. But the purpose of this is to do mindful remembering. Reflection is one of the biggest things that we as human beings can do. And this podcast is just me doing that out loud, encouraging you to do the same. Like, I'm showing my shame and I'm putting my stuff out there to show you that I'm not ashamed anymore, to heal myself, to remind myself of all the beautiful things I went through, so that as you go throughout your life, if you find yourself going through a similar situation, knowing that you too can overcome it and stuff. Okay? If that sounds good, I'm going to go ahead and get into this week's letter.
Drew Prince Music.
Ooh. Ooh. Uh. This week's letter is entitled For the Lonely Healers Out There. Remember who you are. Real kings always win. Beyonce already. My name is Honest Am, and I am the creator of the Honestly Sis newsletter, a bi-weekly newsletter geared towards people who are truly trying to get their shit together. This newsletter has always been a safe space for me to tell personal stories, but after organic growth in the beginning, the audience hit a standstill. And while there are many factors at play, I know the biggest one is my lack of promotion. So, in the name of expansion, I am turning this newsletter into a podcast in the hopes that I can find my tribe and take this thing nationwide. But before we begin this journey together, you should know that this podcast almost didn't happen. I reached out to ex-boyfriends, old collaborators, and even random people on Twitter. I connected with old mentees and owners of spaces, all in the hopes of making this podcast the best and most professional thing ever. So much so that it almost didn't happen for a year. Then I went to a conference in New York and met this fly brown tan chick who told me to just do it. Get Riverside and get a mic. One YouTube tutorial showed me that I was making this a bigger thing than it needed to be. But I'm not alone, am I? It's a thing that we do as humans. We want to be the best, the brightest, the most professional when we get right out the gate. But when we do this type of striving for perfection, it does not leave room for growth. In the words of the great Angie Martinez, I am going to give myself some time to be whack, which is terrifying because who wants to be seen as trying in this Instagram and TikTok world? However, I believe that is precisely what God has called me to do. So instead of a 3-man camera crew complete with a producer and a video editor, I am doing what I can with what I have and allowing God to do the rest. I am in a season of my life where I am being called to embody who I want to become. But I still find myself doubting and questioning if this is something I really wanted to do. If I'm being honest, I have been mentally tired of the letdowns, and I didn't know if I had it in my heart to take another disappointment. Doing this podcast felt like I was setting myself up for more disappointment, and I began to wonder maybe I'm too sensitive to deal in the art world. Maybe I can't handle all of this rejection. I told myself that I would finish this book and disappear, but I knew in my heart as I said that thought I didn't want to give up. I want to be seen. I believe in this work that I do. And I want Honestly Sis, and I want the world to see Honestly Sis. Plus, I refuse to allow my old life. I knew I couldn't give up, because I know that deep down inside, I want to be seen. I believe in the work that I do, and I want the world to see Honestly Sis. I truly believe that these stories can change people's lives and help heal the world. Plus, I refuse to allow the pain of my old life to change me. So I wipe my tears and vow to never disappear again. This season of my life, I am allowing myself to live more fully, loudly, and honestly. It took me a while to get to remember that I am who I am without a man, organizational, or friends. This podcast will either be the best thing ever or just another thing. I began to think about Tracy G's Beauty and the Beast podcast. It wasn't a massive podcast or even a long running one, but I often find myself going back to those episodes and listening to them over and over. That podcast has helped me during the darkest moments of my life. And if Honestly Sis can do that for one person, then that will be enough. But it wasn't just that podcast. I can name plenty others. But the final inspiration came from reading this book called Honey Girl last summer. It's a lesbian love story about a woman who randomly marries another woman in Vegas. Her wife turns out to be a radio host of a show about monster and other supernatural beings. Every night, her wife would tell stories about lonely creatures so that other lonely creatures would know that they were not alone. After finishing the book, I thought about how badly I wish that that show existed. Then I realized this is precisely what Honestly Says the podcast can be. It can be the podcast for the lonely healers out there. So when this podcast becomes the number one on the health and the storytelling charts, know that it almost didn't happen. If this podcast is for any little black girl wondering if her story matters, this podcast is for all the outsiders, all the black sheep, all the trailblazers to know that you are never alone. For every artist that is questioning whether or not they should center their art, for every artist that is wondering whether or not if they should center themselves in their art, may you be inspired to do what the world would never. Honestly, Sis is for anyone trying to make something out of themselves and something out of nothing. It's for all those people who are healing their family trees. I see you. I love you. This is for all those people out here that are healing their family trees and for all the lone wolves out there. I see you. I love you. I'm rooting for you because I am you. If all that sounds good, please subscribe to join the tribe because in a world full of filters, it is time for some. So, how will these next couple of weeks will go? So, the next couple of weeks are going to flow. Like you're going to have next week, you're going to get your very first Honestly Sis newsletter, entitled Honest Wednesdays. Then you will get an Activation 101. This podcast is a weekly podcast where you would get a letter one week and an activation slash channeling the next week. Every podcast we will do a deep dive or whatever topic comes up in the letter or in the activation, and then we'll conclude the podcast with maybe some thoughts, maybe some questions, maybe some journal prompts, maybe some things to consider. Okay, does that sound good? If that does, then please subscribe. Please come back. Make sure that you come back to our very first official episode for this Honestly Sis. Okay, so let's try. thank you guys so much for listening to this very first episode, this introduction. Like I said, next week we will be back to it. We'll start getting into our regular scheduled program. Until we meet again, dream those dreams. Never let the internet rush you, and never, ever, ever let someone tell you what you cannot.
Drew Prince Music.
Our wonderful theme music is from Drew Prince himself. This episode was written, produced by me. Honestly Sis is an independently owned and operated podcast. So if you would like to support this space, please make sure you go ahead and subscribe. You can do that on Substack /Honestly Sis. Or you can visit us at www.honestlysis.com. See you next week. All right.